We have been in a supply side recession. That is what has caused inflation. We have to go through a process of taking all the excess money that's been put in out. And when you do that, we will destroy demand, and then that'll trigger a demand side recession because people
will destroy asset values.
And we will destroy asset values. So
we started that process. Asset values went real quick. Yeah,
that will happen second.
So the balance sheets of that segment of the population that is overspending right now, once their balance sheets really take the hit and they take a hard look at what their savings are, they're going to cut spending.
Right. Yeah, but the point is, I think we're still firmly in that first phase. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the reason why I think that we're still in the first part of this process is because people, broadly speaking, still have a lot of savings because of all the stimulus checks. There is still a lot of money. So how will we know, maybe is the better point, when all of that excess savings has been, torn away from these people because of high prices? I suspect it's when Jason's first chart starts to close, right? So when people are, they're more motivated to re-enter the workforce. I think that's a signal. Freeberg, your signal is another one, which is when credit delinquencies really start to spike. It's because people then, tapped out their savings, then they tap their credit cards, and then all of a sudden they become delinquent. When all of those things happen, you're probably now at a point where that first phase of the supply side issues are largely done, and now you get to the demand destruction. But all of those roads, unfortunately, lead to the same conclusion, which is equities get really under pressure. There is no scenario where there's a bid to equities. Why would you buy something that has lower earnings in the future? Or why would you buy something that has a lower discount rate for profits in the future? In this case, both are true. I just don't see where all of a sudden there are these writ large mass layoffs. I think that you can have inflation and a recession at the same time. This is what my point is. I think we have been in a supply side recession, meaning the day of the pandemic, it's not as if demand stopped. It's not as if you and I, David, didn't want to go out or use DoorDash or take an Uber or watch a movie in a movie theater. We were not allowed, right? And so we found other ways in order to fulfill our demand. That's why Shopify, did so well on behalf of the merchants that they served. That's why Robinhood did so well. That's why Fortnite did so well, right? We found other places to spend money. But what went away was the supply. And those incentives didn't come back, and they're still not back. That's why prices keep going up.
This is the problem, is the definition of a recession, right, Chamath?
It's not the problem. It's just that most people don't understand that you can have a supply side recession and a demand side recession. They just manifest in different ways. So, I guess Ackman is roughly right in some ways. He's roughly not so right in some others. I think that we have an issue where we are going to transfer the supply side issues that are driving inflation to average everyday consumers and their ability to buy things. I still think that the average everyday consumer's desire to buy things is what it was from before, and on the margin is probably higher. I do think at some point it will start to change when prices get high enough, but I don't think we've reached that point of equilibrium yet. And the reason is because companies like the Walmarts of the world, who see this demand on literally a real-time basis, knows better than anybody else when and how much they can raise prices downstream into their supply chain. So when you see something like this in the Wall Street Journal, I would just encourage us all to say, they must see that demand is the same or better. And so they're going to now push those price increases down to everybody else, because now Walmart says, here is an opportunity for me to defend my earnings power. And this is why I think we're in this first inning of this. So I don't know whether Ackman is right or wrong, but I think we're in the early phases of a two-phase recession. Government failure and how we reacted to the pandemic. In hindsight, Sachs was right all along. We overreacted by shutting everything down. We probably could have kept some supply online by understanding masking early on. And then second, we exacerbated with failed government policy because we gave everybody trillions and trillions of dollars, and we entered the capital markets and perverted it with another 7 or 8 trillion more. We have to go through a process of taking all the excess money that's been put in out. And when you do that, we will destroy demand, and then that'll trigger a demand side recession. I think the point is that, we were kind of in a supply side recession, and now by raising rates to some crazy amount, the end of which we were still not sure about, may actually then trigger the demand destruction to have a demand side recession. And so I don't know that we've lived in a modern point in time where both things have been true, right? There's been a principle of macroeconomics that everybody's always kind of debating, is this a supply side issue? Is it a demand side issue? We know that in COVID, it was a supply side issue. We took all the supply out of the market. And now we're trying to figure out, when we exhaust, all of the money we've given people, and we destroy demand and take the incentives for demand to go away, right? Consumer confidence is now starting to turn. What happens then? Well, we're going to figure that out in the next 6 or 9 months. But the thing is, you have both that are true. It's not as if the supply side of the economy has been fixed. It's not as if everybody is running at 100% capacity. It's not as if all the supply chain issues have been worked out.
Yep.
So I don't know. I just think it's a very complicated situation. I think people are roughly the same way. And I think their behavior is, people want to buy wheels. And now all of a sudden you find that because everything all around the world was shut down, there's no rubber to make the wheels. There's no steel to make the axle. There's no people to put them all together. And so what happens? Well, prices go up because, again, you gave everybody else $2.5 trillion. So they're like, well, I used to pay $1 for your wheel. I'm willing to pay you $2 now. Just make the wheel. Give it to me before you give it to somebody else. So that is like the classic definition of a supply side recession. And the Fed basically confirmed this in the minutes that they just released today. Jason, can you just read the quote that you had in the notes?
Well, the one up top, a significant risk that elevated inflation should become entrenched if the public begins to question their resolve. Weddings and all of this stuff that's happening. Yeah. And so I think people are really spending money. And if you look at it, the consumer is holding up amazingly. It's got to be some combination of jobs, home prices, and this inflation.
But this is why there has not been a downtick in demand. I don't know why everybody thinks that there's been a downtick in demand.
There was an article today. It's not showing up in the numbers yet.
No, I think it is.
Then it's just anecdotal and guessing.
It's very subtle. Okay, sure, it is. There is a subtle.
I actually disagree with you guys. I actually think that the economy is pivoting on a dime here, and it's starting to show up subtly in the numbers. Here's some other data points. Consumer sentiment. Biggest drop in consumer sentiment in 40 years. That was in the last month. Right track, wrong track polling. Only 10% of the country thinks we're on the right track. If you poll people and ask, are we in a recession? Something like close to 60% of the country already thinks we're in a recession. There's a slight political tint to that. More Republicans than Democrats think we're in a recession. However, even roughly half of Democrats think we're in a recession. So I think
those are all feelings, not behavior, though, Sachs. We're looking at the data, not the sentiment.
I think the behavior will catch up with the sentiment. I think I think the behavior is pivoting.
Yeah.
It's just that I think you have to dig beneath the surface and you have to look at things like retail sales, things like that.